and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast revolving and evolving with me, Yorgos Panagiotidis, and the remedy for what ails you,
Ben Maddox. So they've let you out of your containment chamber?
Well, not so much let me out as I've broken through the walls. You know, antibiotics give me incredible strength.
How contagious are you on a rank of 0 to kill the worldo?
Well, I'm probably 2 KTWs.
So what danger would you say I'm in sitting in the same room with you, opposite, without any gauze between us?
Well, you know how in Fight Club they say in a long enough timeline your survival rate drops to 0?
That's right.
Yeah, your survival rate is now below 0.
So I'm going to be double dead?
Yes, double dead.
Because I like to be unique in things. Because, you know...
It's a good thing. It's a good a standard to aspire to.
Because to expire to, indeed.
Aspire to as well, yeah.
You know, because people die... And they're dead, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
And there's a rumour going round.
Yes.
That's going to happen to all of us.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other rumour, that we're waiting for the dead to rise, and that's why we're all stacking up.
That's not a rumour, Georgios.
Fair enough.
That's prophecy.
All right.
But if I'm going to be more than dead, double dead, not like these normal deadies.
Yeah, the deadites.
Exactly. Well, I'm unique then, aren't I? What does double dead mean? Super double dead.
Super double dead. It's basically like a double hamburger. You enjoy twice the heart attacks.
I'll have 2 heart attacks. Is that the disease you've given me?
Yes.
Heart attacks?
Yes. It's a strange disease.
I wondered why you came in here with a plethora of fried foods and stimulatory drugs, Georgios.
Oh, that was just sort of my apology for being sick earlier. All for you.
Well, that's fine. I mean, it was fine that you were sick.
Right.
It was then the sort of writhing around in it with gleeful eyes that I was a bit concerned about.
I know, that's just my my daily going to bed routine.
Anyway, so what we're talking about today.
We are talking about the future. And it's worth talking about because that is where you and I will spend the rest of our lives.
That's true. Well, I live in the present, Georgios. I'm not one of these consumer-driven sheeple, Georgios. I live in the present. I've got like one of those Asian symbols tattooed on my body and that, and I go, and my chakras are open. So you live in your dystopian future. I'll experience the present as it is with leaves and cats.
You're a very bad liar.
Anyway, so the future of gaming. So what we're going to talk about is what we think, where we think the hobby's going in different aspects. So not just,
will there be yellow meeples in the future? The answer is no. Sorry, Nick.
Well, there won't be because tamarind is becoming outlawed.
Who's that?
It's a bloke who paints the meeples yellow.
Damn it.
One man does it. One man for the entire collection of yellow meeples. And so he's being made illegal.
That's just, I say no to the Chinese government. Don't do that.
Because he wiggles his willy
all right, during
work time, and they consider that an unproductive usage of time.
But he was on his own. But if he's doing this alone, who cares? Who's watching him? Are they watching him?
Everyone's watching him, George.
All right, so it's sort of like a TV show.
Tamarindcam.com. Have you ever been on it?
No, not yet.
It's just you see a small Chinese man naked, painting yellow meeples, waggling his willy. It's brilliant.
It's I know how I'm going to spend the rest of the week. In front of YouTube.
It's not on YouTube.
Oh, shit.
It's tamarindcam.com, George, as I told you.
I thought all videos on YouTube.
This episode sponsored by tamarindcam.com. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the economics. We're going to talk about the social aspects. Mm-hmm. What will change in terms of how we associate with each other. And then sort of more nebulous kind of things.
Even more nebulous.
I like nebulous, isn't he? So, Georgios.
Yes.
What do you think is the broadest effector of what will happen in games? Is it, as the capitalists will have you believe, sort of market forces? Or does that stem from the actual things themselves, the design?
I'm not
chicken before the egg. What I want to know is, will certain games be designed in a certain way and dominate the gaming spectrum because the market dictates, that plastic costs X or wood cost X? Or will the direction that games go in the future come from the people making them, the designers, the things that are being produced? What do you think?
As with
Top down or bottom up?
As with all things, the answers to complex solutions are very, very simple and easily put in a single line. Yes to all of that. I think, again, it's a confluence of hundreds of factors. It's things like availability of components. I mean, if all of a sudden, I think a while back we had a lot of games with custom dice because, as I've been told, at that time custom dice were fairly easy or fairly cheap to come by. So a lot of new venues opened up for publishers. As I understand it, I think one of the I don't remember which game it was, but one of the recent games had insisted on publisher side to include a certain mechanic because they had these things available to them, which I guess is as much, I mean, it's as legitimate a reason to design certain elements in a game as any other. Well, so what I'm saying is, yes, production factors will be a reason for the direction the hobby's going to take. There'll be just general trends. Certain games may take the hobby by storm, or may even unlock new, as of now, untapped markets. Like a few years back when Nintendo came out with the Wii console, when all of a sudden you had these so-called casuals, the so-called non-high-end gamers discovering video games for the first time. So instead of your neck-deep Call of Duty gamers, complex gamers like ego shooter gamers or first-person shooters in English, all of a sudden you had a new flux of people coming in who just liked the ease of handling the Wii controller. That was a brand new market that all of a sudden you have this expansion of the market, selling video games to people who usually don't buy them. I think we might have something like this waiting for us in the future in board games as well. Maybe somebody is sitting out there with a very, very accessible game, something that makes both Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride look like really, really complex, messy, and cumbersome to play. And all of a sudden people buy whatever this magic new game is and go, ooh, I can buy this for my niece. I can buy this for my grandmother. I can buy this for male parts of my family as well. All of a sudden we might have a new market, a new group of people who'll be excited about board games again. All these things factor in, change the market. So what I'm trying to say is this: the economy will play a role, and it will be sort of the tissue connecting all the other factors that make up markets, that make up board games, the designs, the people, the availability, and the price. I don't know, all these kind of things.
Do you think then you will see will that promote a kind of sea change in the people who are personalities within the hobby? Because if you look at the sort of personalities within the hobby now, you have Eric Lang, you have Bruno Catala, you have Ignacy Trzewiczek, you have Martin Wallace, these people who are making, for want of a better word, and I don't want this to mean disparaging, but sort of conventional hobby games, in that there's an element of complexity, there's an element of rigorousness, where accessibility at all costs is certainly not the consideration. Mm-hmm. And when you go to Essen in 10 years, that it won't be those kind of people designing those kind of games that are the people that people flock to see, but it'll be a different raft of designers that are designing things that are different in character. Do you think the essential character of the hobby will change?
That's interesting. I think most of the people you mentioned, barring age, will still be with us in 10 years designing games. I don't see, this is basically their career. This is what their livelihood, and I think they have enough skill and enough history in the industry to, if they put out a game, especially somebody like Martin Wallace, if he designs a new game and puts it up, there's going to be a lot of interest by people who know Martin Wallace games, who love Martin Wallace games. And same is true for Eric Lang now, and for Bruno Catala, Bruno Faiduti. All these sort of household names of game design, they'll still be there in 10 years. They might slightly change the type of games they make. I think Eric Lang is interesting that he does both slightly complex or complex seeming games and very simple games, whereas Bruno Catala is very much about very accessible games, and Martin Wallace is very much about fairly deep, and I don't want to say inaccessible, at least designed for a certain spectrum of gamers. I think those will still be around. The interesting thing will definitely be who the new voices are going to be. Are we going to see more designers, as you said, putting accessibility above all else? Are we going to see more designers who put in really complicated games, something that are people who flock to something like Food Chain Magnate, going to find new designers. Maybe something like Gloomhaven, which is a very, very dense game, not necessarily, well, both in rules and in volume. But maybe this is also a new direction that the hobby will take. Maybe we'll see more games that are huge time investments, both on a single session and over longer period of time. I don't know. I'm leaning towards more accessibility, because it seems to me this is definitely where the money is, because this is how you get new people into the hobby. And once you get those people into the hobby, they might find slightly less accessible, more challenging games more appealing. This is basically the video game strategy. You get them when they're young with a Nintendo game, with these bright colors, easy to play games. Then as they grow older, they discover, they're more complex games, they're more aggressive games, they're more exciting games, more difficult games out there as well. At some point, you reach the point where, video gamers remember nostalgia and go back to Nintendo games.
I think it's really, really interesting, because you hear a lot of people in the commentariat on board games talk about Settlers of Catan. Right. As they use this as an example, and they say, if this was today, Settlers of Catan would not be considered a gateway game because of its relative complexity. And which suggests to me that games are skewing towards, I'm going to use it, the simple. They're skewing towards the simple when you talk about gateway games now. Because if you look at Settlers and you look at Ticket to Ride, I think Ticket to Ride is quite a lot simpler in terms of different things you have to do, moving parts within the game, than Settlers of Catan is. And then I think you have, there is this small is beautiful attitude when it comes to sort of artistic delicacy. That's a terrible sentence. I'm sorry, that's a terrible sentence. But I mean, if you look at, if someone builds something that's huge and complex and crenellated, and you go, that's fantastic. When they then do something that is two or three things, that sort of Hokusai thing of two brushstrokes on the paper tells you everything, you suddenly go, that's astonishing. And that's why Codenames is so groundbreaking in many ways, because it's so simple. Right. It's just it's a little combination of things that seemingly are so obvious, but no one's thought of them before. Until they come into being, you don't realize that was a possibility, that beautiful simplicity, right? And so I think Codenames will tell us a lot, even more, because we were talking about the two games that came out that year. You had Codenames and Pandemic Legacy. Right. I think Codenames will have a far greater impact than Pandemic Legacy will, in that I think Codenames will say, look, this is where the money is, but this is also where the challenge is. In the same way that Love Letter did a few years previously. Extracting as much as possible from as little as possible, I think, will be an aspiration that people will go for. Simply because it's cheap, but also it's a real intellectual challenge, I think. I'm not sure. I think there's room for both approaches. I think the hobby is broad enough that you can have both currents going on. You can have one direction going into the simpler, more essentialized way of design, and you have another direction going into more surround experience, where you invest time over multiple weeks or months to get the full experience of a game. I think I could see both things taking off. Well, not so much taking off, but both things affecting the direction of the hobby. I mean, right now it's hard to tell which group of gamers defines the direction of the hobby more. Is it the hobby gamers themselves, who are all about complex and sophisticated and challenging experiences, or is it maybe the occasional gamer who wants a nice simple game that they can play with their friends or with another group of friends, where they don't have to spend a lot of time explaining it, where everyone immediately understands, oh, this is where the fun is, and I'm enjoying this, and it is easy to get into. I honestly cannot tell which group is more influential right now. I feel I'm spending more time with these, let's say, I don't want to use the word sophisticated, but let's say experienced gamers. Whenever I talk to retailers, they do point out that a lot of these new faces that are coming in are more interested in the simpler games that you mentioned earlier. So it may be both, and they may be the two tent poles of the hobby, where we sort of
the two ends of the spectrum where we swing back and forth again. On occasion, sometimes we want something simpler, something we can play with everyone, and sometimes we want to play something that we can only play with experienced gamers who know the ins and outs, complex machinery of a 40-page rulebook.
Well, I think, it's inevitable. It's the same with every form of art, right?
Yeah.
In that, if board gaming does become this mainstream thing that sort of everyone kind of hopes it does, I mean, I think part of the reason is, you get into a band on their first album and, 14 people like them. And you're kind of waiting for them to explode and get a number one hit so you can say, well, I was there before everyone knew who they were. There is that aspect to it. I mean, no doubt.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Absolutely. But I don't think that's the main thing. I think if it does become mainstream in the way, it's always going to be that thing that a Joss Whedon movie is going to make much, much more money than a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. You can debate on the relative merits and the relative quality of what those things are, but it's the accessible, the simple, the broader that will always be successful. More successful in terms of money than the sort of more esoteric, sophisticated.
Well, yeah, but more accessible also means having a bigger impact. And I think if you're looking at board games as art, or even film as art, impact should not be underestimated.
Absolutely. And the thing, it's that we were talking about this before we turned the mics on. It's impact. When you use the word impact in this context, what you mean is money, right? Well, no,
it's the other way around. When I speak about money, what I mean is impact. The more money something makes, the more people is reached. The bigger the reach, the bigger the possible impact.
Which is why Codenames is so refreshing.
Right.
Because it's not just a steaming bag of shit that someone put in a box and then sold to people and it went fucking crazy, right? It's something that's actually rigorously designed, exciting, and can cross boundaries, and people can say, it's The Godfather in 1972. It's a film that has absolute broad appeal that everyone wants to see, but it's actually fantastic as well. It's not a series of sight gags linked together by bad dialogue, whereas Codenames is exactly the same. It's kind of, in many ways, it's kind of like The Godfather of board gaming in many ways, because it's rigorously designed. It's, the inception of it was something to be good rather than something to be popular, and yet it's able to be popular. And I guess my hope is, and it never will be the case because that's not how markets work. Shit rises to the top, usually. In terms of making money. My hope is that in the future you will have these really good games, but that can cross a boundary and allow people in without sacrificing quality. So let's talk about sort of broader sort of business. You've put here a similar development to video games. Yeah. And I guess, do you mean by that you will have a movement in which you have your XXX titles? Triple X is something different, isn't it?
Quite, yeah.
It's a film with Vin Diesel.
Exactly.
Very exciting.
And Ice Cube, but we forget about that.
These AAA titles, these games that are, the big
the Call of Duties, yeah.
Yeah, and
then
Halos. And then you have sort of boutique things.
I think we can sort of see the groundwork for that already happening. We have these huge Kickstarter titles already. We have games like Gloomhaven. We can have games like Scythe. I'm blanking on other big exploding Kickstarters.
But where does Gloomhaven sit, though? Because it seems to me Gloomhaven isn't quite a sort of Asmodee big name title.
Oh no, it is. I'm literally just talking about the amount of money it pushes. It's not about, it's just, even if it's just one guy in his shed putting together this game by hand, if he gets enough financial support, he moves up the ranks. And it's what I'm thinking, what I could imagine happening is eventually we reach the point where studios are willing to actually put in money to develop a game, to design a game, to have number of artists working on it in concert, have a number of playtest groups working on it in concert, developing it over a more or less short period of time, and then putting it out at a specific bracket in the year, around Gen Con, around Essen, to have maximum impact, to really not manipulate the market, but to optimize the reach they have with this product. Basically, what I can imagine is a group like Asmodee eventually sitting down and really doing treating it like a full-on high-end kind of business, putting in the money to get huge return on investment.
Well, we've already seen it to some degree. We've seen it once. I think we've seen one example of this.
Which one?
Mechs and Minions. I think it's a classic example of that, where they've gone, okay, we want to design a game that's going to have huge impact, that's going to sell really well. Mm-hmm. And it's not in the way the industry works at the moment, where you have publishers who sit at tables and guys come up, guys and girls, I'm using it to mean both, come up and say, here's my thing. And they go, okay, ding, 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 ding. Whereas I think you're right. I think the commissioning aspect will become more prevalent.
Right.
And this committee aspect, where they'll say, okay, we'll have a committee of people who come together and handpick a group of people to come together and do this thing for a specific purpose. Mm-hmm. Because at the moment, even now, although it is changing with someone like Eric Lang and Fantasy Flight, very much like this, but I think the hobby still feels like it's guys in garages, coming up with ideas and then presenting them to companies. I think that will change, right?
Oh yeah, I can definitely see that happening. I mean, Kickstarter was, the amount of money that goes through Kickstarter just for board games is impressive, and apparently it has surpassed video games going through Kickstarter, though there may be a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, I think I could see this happening. I could see some publisher sitting down and going, all right, let's not do the small shit now. Let's treat this like a huge product producing business. And I'm not necessarily opposed to this idea, because again, these AAA titles in video games can be fantastic.
Yeah.
So I can sort of see there's a potential for the industry to go in that direction. But on the other hand, there are still these indie designers, these self-publishers, the small handful of designers who band together to form a publisher, to form a small company, to put out these games that they are really passionate about, but they don't want to hand off to some big company. And maybe we'll see an expansion of that as well. I can which is more or less what we're seeing in video games right now. As far as I can tell, I'm not as deep into video games right now as I used to be a few years ago, but my impression is that you have these AAA studios, you have these indie developers, and you have a small, ever-shrinking number of publishers in the middle who will either close up shop because there's just too much competition, or will just be swallowed up by bigger publishers.
Yeah, I think it's the same as any sort of entertainment industry. And I think as board gaming becomes more and more professionalized,
right,
that you will see a shift in business practices, but you will also see a democratization.
Hopefully.
Because if you look at someone like Panda, right, as a company, they're getting better and better at making their processes cheaper and cheaper, right? Which is great for your big publishers, because they get to produce games cheaper. And actually, as the trend is going, they probably get to produce games cheaper and not decrease prices particularly.
No.
But also it's particularly good for smaller people, in that they can go to Panda, and Panda have the processes in place that you can have affordable production that looks good, that isn't just, people gluing shit onto cards. As actual decent production looks like a proper produced game. And so I guess I'm saying the more popular gaming becomes, a rising tide hopefully rises all boats, right?
Yeah. Or, swallows them in a tidal wave, which is also possible. Because I know about, tides.
You do?
Yeah.
You're a marine biologist, aren't you, Jordan?
I am. I'm one of my many degrees.
Yeah, and it's that thing, I guess it's that thing that, whereas the hobby board game market seemed to be one cohesive whole pretty much, where everyone knew each other, I think the more popular it gets, it's inevitable. It'll start to fragment, and you'll have big companies, medium-sized companies that will always struggle, and then little boutique producers will be producing, 3,000 copies of one game.
Right.
And we'll all sort of gravitate towards, even though we have that now, I think, Splotter.
Right.
Have always been that sort of DIY kind of producer that sort of slap it all together themselves,
Right, yeah.
And I think I don't even know where I'm going, Georgia. Speak.
No, I think this DIY quality is still present in most, even small, mid-tier publishers as well. I think when it comes down to it, I remember this video, I think, that made the round a few months ago about a Chinese production facility for board games. And you have these fancy technocratic ideas about these long assembly lines and machines putting together the parts into little baggies, and these robot arms putting them into another bag and then slapping labels on them. And the truth is, no, it's four guys in a warehouse on a rickety machine, more or less. It looks fairly modern, but there are no robot arms. There's no shiny interface design like computer generated whatevers. It's just four guys of more or less middle age or older, men, women, just, folding packages, putting things into baggies, occasionally probably forgetting one, hopefully not, putting them into a bag. So there's the idea that this is a highly professional and highly industrialized, semi-industrialized, hobby. I at least find myself constantly reminding myself, no, this is not the case. This is just a guy sitting down. It starts with a guy or girl sitting down at the desk, writing down ideas on a piece of paper. And then the next step is sitting on a computer doing some graphic design. And then the next step is, sending it to a production facility where people sort of print out these sheets of tokens. And then if you're small enough, you get all this stuff, delivered to your house and you pack it yourself because you can't afford to spend money on people doing it for you. This is all, a lot of it is very, very handmade, even if it doesn't look it, even if it looks like highly professional because it's shrink wrapped, or because, you have a gloss cover, or, there are more than 4 colors on the board. It's still, at the end of the day, it's basic menial labor doing the thing.
Do you think it ever will become this notion? Because if you go to Essen, right, you've got the big stands. It seems to be, because I think you're right. I think when you get into the hobby, you realize actually it is a load of blokes in garages putting things together, and the achievement of the production facilities is quite astonishing because what it puts this sheen across. And we assume these board game companies have loads of people working for them, and most of them are just one guy, right? And do you think it ever will? Because I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about technology and the effect it's having on us.
None whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how, the main sort of social media apps, they put a premium on attention time. Mm-hmm. It's an attention economy. They make more money the longer you are on their product, and that's how they engineer their products.
Did we listen to the same podcast by accident?
It's distinctly possible. And so there is a concern in our society. Whether it's Ludditism, I think part of it is Ludditism, but I think part of it is actually based in reality too. There's a real concern that we're becoming more atomized.
Yeah.
That we're spending more time in front of screens than we are in front of faces. Mm-hmm. And board games demand that you be in a room with people.
Yeah.
I think
wear clothes.
To get the full experience.
Yeah, to get the full experience, you obviously have to take off your clothes. But
that's right. So do you think the way society is going in one direction with regards to our relationship to technology, our relationship to tablets and smartphones, do you think board games can ever claw any of that back?
Oh, yeah.
And encourage people into rooms again?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think...
on a mass scale, I mean. In this idea that board games are suddenly going to break through to the mainstream, that implies a certain amount of consumption that is far in excess of what they are at the moment, right?
Maybe, yeah. I think generally one of the main appeals to a lot of people, whether they're aware of it or not, is the fact that they are looking away from screens. They get to look people in the eyes, in the face, or in any other body part if they so desire. But they're people at the table, actual people, not virtual representations, not a name on a screen and a voice in your headphones, but people. I think to a certain extent this is an appeal of board games. This is as you like to bring it up, a USP of board games. It's the social dimension of gaming that attracts people to the hobby. It's not the fantastic designs, as fantastic as they may be. It's not the shiny objects, as helpful as they may be. It is the fact that it's a social experience. And yes, I do think that, I don't know if board games are going to sort of stem the tide of this digital atomization of society. Ooh, nice phrase. But I do think there's a maybe not a need, but a desire there to find ways to connect again, and not just, digitally, but personally.
Because it seems to me that's dependent on, I think to a large degree, the success of board games going into the future in terms of mainstream success. I think there'll always be board games, there'll always be designer board games, because in terms of actual financial outlay, they're relatively cheap to produce, right? But I think because most people make them as hobbies. They don't get paid to do them, right? But I think to a larger degree, that sort of mainstream explosion of board games in which everyone's got a copy of some kind of hobby board game, not Monopoly or whatever, in the house and play them regularly and see this as a legitimate leisure activity depends, I think, strongly on society's repulsion to technology. I think because at the moment we're living in the infancy of sort of smartphone, tablet technology, and everyone is throwing themselves in head first. Right. I mean, myself included. I mean, the endorphins. I'm so addicted to the endorphins of the little ding, ding, ding when I get a fucking retweet or whatever, you know. And I think to a large degree, if we sort of pull ourselves away from that brink and say, okay, we need a healthier relationship to these things. We need to say, okay, I don't check my emails 150 bloody times a day. I don't look at Facebook the majority of my time. That will determine to a large degree whether things like board games, whether things like going to the pub and having a bloody pint with people survive on into the future, right?
I think I don't disagree with you. I think it's less about, you know, consciously, I want to stay away from this. It's a lot of it, in my experience, has to do with the prestige that certain actions or certain behavior gains in a society. Like in my circle of friends, like 15, 20 years ago, it became this common thing. I guess it's just not just my circle of friends, where, you know, you casually mention, oh no, I don't have a TV. I don't watch TV. It wasn't about, you know, I need to sort of get away from this because it's eating up my time, because it's, you know, it's filling my head with nonsense or whatever our parents told us. It's just more or less, part of it is, you know, it's freeing not to schedule your day or your week around the TV schedule, but also there's a certain prestige to saying, oh no, I don't have a TV.
Well, it hints at a sort of sophistication, doesn't it?
Sure. And I don't even want to disparage this idea. I'm trying to say that giving a certain behavior positive connotation, like the way you would say, like the way knowledge about local football teams has a certain positive connotation in a lot of social circles, or having a rough idea of what, you know, the main parties stand for has a certain positive connotation among certain circles. I think an argument can be made that if we somehow manage to culturally positively connotate the idea, oh yeah, I have a few board games at home. Oh, of course I play board games. It's something I do on the weekend with my friends. If we get to the point where this becomes something positive that people casually mention, I think this is where you will notice finally board games being just part of the mainstream, not just hanging on, but defining part of the mainstream, because this is something that, you know, people just casually do. They have more than one board game. It's not Monopoly. It's not even just Settlers of Catan Ticket to Ride. It's, oh yes, I have this new edition of Brass.
But the point is, though, saying I don't have a TV, no matter how casually you try and toss that into a conversation, it is the least casual thing you will ever say. You are making a very and niche statement about yourself.
Sure, but my point was this was 10 years ago. Nowadays, nobody even mentions it because we all started
because no one has a bloody TV anymore.
Yes,
right?
But also because we all started watching Netflix and streaming stuff. And I don't mind. Well, I don't watch that much, but mostly because I don't have the time. But yeah, I mean, it didn't take too long for me to move away from this idea of, TV is for the masses. I don't have a TV, to there's just nothing on it that I'm interested in. I'll kind of like what Netflix or whatever streaming service I'm using has, and that's fine. I think this is hopefully where board games eventually will be. Where the casual mention of if you having 5 or 6 board games or 10 or 12 board games isn't something that gets you weird looks, like, you're playing board games, but, oh, interesting. Which ones? What kind of board games? What's your palate like? What's your taste like? What kind of board games do you enjoy? The point where it becomes more or less casual topic conversation, the way we talk about, I like this TV show, I like that TV show. That's hopefully the goal we're going towards.
It's inevitably going to be niche in the future, I think. It's not because of snobbishness or a sort of disparaging of the hobby. I think that's part of the reason it's niche at the moment. But I just think as a practicality, why is telly so successful? Why was the cinema so concerned about television when television first came around? Is because human beings are path of least resistance animals, right? So it's easier
That's a very, very nice way of saying fucking lazy.
It's easier to go in the reason television is so successful is because you just go in your front room, turn the telly on, and it does it all for you.
Yeah.
In the same way that smartphones are so successful. I mean, they've become the modern analog of the car for me.
Right.
Smartphones. In the car was originally conceived as a sort of leisure pursuit.
Right.
And then it became indispensable to do your work. Smartphones, tablets are becoming that now.
Right.
I mean, especially the more esoteric and nebulous jobs become, certainly in the West. We couldn't do this. I've been thinking about closing my Facebook account just because, this is the modern equivalent of I don't have a TV, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't have a Facebook account.
But I can't. If we're doing this, I can't close my Facebook account.
Right.
Because I need to be active on Facebook. I need to post things to Facebook, to Twitter, to Instagram,
Yeah, possibly.
It's just a necessity, right? And so games will always be niche because we're lazy animals.
Right.
And getting a group of people together to sit round a table is inherently more difficult than putting a TV on. So just really briefly to wrap up.
Right. Do we have to wrap?
Yes, if you can.
No,
but in
can't.
Greek, please.
No, I can't. I'm going to write a Greek rap at some point, yeah.
What I want to know is do you see the future of the hobby? This is a bit of a facile question, but do you see the future of the hobby as positive? And define positive in whichever way you choose.
Yes. I don't know. I think we've been talking about this idea of board games breaking into the mainstream a lot. And I think that might be the wrong way of looking at it. It's not so much breaking into the mainstream as just becoming ever prevalent, just becoming present, not becoming a new fad that people get excited about, that has like a huge following in every social strata you can imagine, which I guess some video games to a certain extent have, but more like board games just showing up everywhere where you don't expect, where you used to not expect them. There were times where, board game cafes showing up more often. People having a small collection of board games that you wouldn't expect to have. People talking about, meeting friends to play board games with, as opposed to doing whatever else people do. I don't know what else people do. I just play board games. I have 2 kids, people. Just the idea of not so much becoming this huge cultural centerpiece, but more like the background noise to everything. Board games showing up, like nerds love to watch their favorite TV shows and pick up board games on the shelves. Small details like that. That just sort of suggests to me that board games will become a more accepted facet of what you do with your free time. And there's a lot of reasons why it's attractive, and there's a lot of reasons why it's appealing. And I think the only thing that might become a change is that it moves away from being something you do with children or something you do only with your family, and more into something that you do with friends, something you do with workmates, something you do maybe even with people you haven't met, you don't know very well, but you just happen to be at the same place at the same time, and one of you has a game. I think this is the future, whether it's good or bad. Again, I am an occasionally optimistic person. I think in general it's good. People connecting with one another is good. Or, in some cases, faces connecting with faces. Yeah, I think in general, the development is going to be a positive one. And the question is whether market forces will be detrimental or supportive of that.
Well, I think for me, obviously the future is pretty bright. I say it's one of the few areas in my life in which it is. And I see that in a couple of ways. One, I think the expansion of the hobby, and by expansion I mean sort of more people getting into it, is a positive, because it brings more money, which allows an expansion in ambition of the hobby. Mm-hmm. Things can look better, and as much as I hate to admit it, the feel and the look of things is an aspect, and an important aspect, into the enjoyment of games, right? But also I think games have got better. Oh, yeah. And in the time I've been into gaming, games have got better. They have focused on things like keeping people engaged the whole time, minimizing downtime. Some people may rail and say, the games in 2004, 2005 were much less Skinner boxes in the sense that they were difficult and they punished you, and games have become easier and more rewarding. And in a sense, a lot of modern Eurogames, for example, are, you're the pigeon, you hit the button, the food comes out. But I really love that. I really love getting something for my input, right? And I think that's where I see the greatest positivity, is that I think games are getting better.
Yeah,
and they
definitely
will continue to get better. And we will look in the future, in the next 10 years, and the innovation in actual design will make us think, wow, how far we've come. And that is always a positive thing. I'm a proponent of components, Georgios. Are you a proponent of components?
No, I'm a corporate shill. Go to spielpro.com.
I went to spielpro.com the other day, and I was amazed at the drones they have now, delivering all the game bits that you think you'd want. They have cubes, Georgios, they have pawns, they have card stands, and they have also blank dice that you can write little pictures on.
That's spielpro.com.
Are you next? Well, pop behind the screen, off with the clothing, bend over and present yourself. Welcome to the guild. Oof.
Yes?
Georgios,
What?
what are you doing here?
I'm sitting here. For some reason, you have me on your list of contacts to call should something happen to you.
I didn't bloody call you, did they?
Yes. What's a DNR?
I just can't believe... I mean, actually, I'm a little bit shocked, to be honest.
Why?
Well, you've been called into the hospital with no explanation to see me, and you don't even look the slightest bit concerned, Georgios.
No, I was kind of expecting this to happen.
What?
Well, you ending up in hospital for some reason. I have a book of reasons why you would end up in hospital. So I'm happy you have all your limbs still attached to you, which is,
You're not helping, Georgios. I'm very nervous.
Why?
You know what it is with men and doctors?
Men and doctors?
Yeah, we don't like them, do we? We see them as monsters. No, they want to touch our testicle and they're men, and we don't like gravelly-fingered men touching our bollocks, do we?
Well, there's a lot wrong with a bunch of those statements. But I think I can see now why you're here.
Why?
It's the Tory, isn't it?
Well, you know, they always say you should check. You should always have a rummage around and have a feel. Well, you know, I woke up one morning...
Right.
And I discovered, like, the Daily Mail, and I saw, like, Richard Littlejohn's column. I'd, like, drawn a circle round it.
Oh, boy.
And drawn, like, a thumbs up.
I was not aware you could draw.
I mean, I can't.
Right.
That's why it looks like a swastika. There's nothing to do with that, Georgios.
Right.
Maybe a little. And anyway, and then, you know, Theresa Maybe...
Yes, I have heard of her.
Called the election. And I was like, right on, Reese, right on. We'll stuff them geography teachers. And then I thought, oh my God. And so I've come to the hospital to have my Tory removed.
Which is a euphemism, you know.
I bloody hope it isn't.
No, they're just replacing parts of you.
With what?
Functioning parts of you.
They're replacing functioning parts of me with functioning parts of me.
No, see, the problem is if you have Tory,
right,
at an advanced stage as it is in your case,
clearly,
a lot of your inner organs are not functioning properly.
Well, like my heart.
Well, your brain, your bollocks, and you know your digestion tract.
Oh no,
is now moving. You know, you might not have noticed it, but you're not shitting out of your arse anymore.
Oh, no. I know it's coming out of my mouth.
There you go.
But no, my testicles do work.
No, they
I just need to be tied upside down and have an orange stuck up my butt cheeks. Then they work perfectly legitimately, Georgios.
Yes, but that basically means you only get to have, working bollocks once a year when you have oranges, which is during Christmas.
So, yeah, and the thing is, it was impacting on my relationship.
To what?
Well, I went out and I bought Janine all this dominatrix stuff. And she had to, stick splintered rulers up me jacksie for me even to pop a bono.
Well, I don't, that may not have anything to do with your Tory.
That's true. I mean, that's been a thing for me for a while.
I think let's put, the blame where it belongs.
But anyway, yeah, so, I mean, I'm shitting it, Georgios. So let's look at these.
That's a plan. Let's look at these.
Guild comments.
Yes.
Just to, take my mind off my impending medical procedures.
Yes, procedures, multiple. Yeah.
So let's go to Robin Z.
Let's talk about the question first, so people who've just dialed in know what we are talking about.
Sorry, I'm just distracted, Georgios. I'm about to go and be operated on, Georgios.
Yes, but in a failing NHS.
Yeah, well, no, it's failing, Georgios.
I know why it's failing, but do tell me.
Not enough private investment. If we just sold off these useless organisations, cut the... Oh my God, George, I really need this operation.
Yes, you do. You do.
Right, so the question was...
what factors decide the size of your game collection?
And Robin Z, is that the precocious pixie-like Swedish pop star Robin?
Yes, that's him. Well, that's the
That's a lady.
Yes, but I think the picture... Oh, wait. The picture suggests a male, so I'm thinking it's one of those cases where, male during the day, female during the night.
Or is it just Robin, when she's all made up for the music video, she looks a lot different than she does like in a cash shot?
No, I prefer my switching gender interpretation because that sort of definitely makes more sense.
Excellent. So what does Robin, great to have you with us, and, being a multi-millionaire pop starlet, you could always chuck us a couple of quid, Robin, you know what I mean? Anyway, what does he say?
Well, right now it's a he because it's during the day.
That's true.
He says, most hobbyists stress about the follow. Ink. Oh, obviously not a native speaker.
Invisible
ink.
Invisible ink.
Yeah,
exactly.
Budgets, space, player, or collector. Those were 3 different points. I just didn't number them. Budget seems self-explanatory, so I'm not going to continue talking about what it says. Space has a few factors, which we know, dimensions like length, height, and breadth.
Carl Sagan.
Depth. Carl Sagan, yeah. Length, width, and Carl Sagan.
Exactly. That is space.
That is space. And player or collector. I think the last point is the most interesting because this distinction about being a player and a collector is, I don't know if it's true, but it's something that people seem invested in.
But most gamers are both, right? Most sort of hardcore board gamers fall into both brackets. I mean, you can go further on one side or the other, but pretty much. Well, I mean, I consider myself a player and a collector.
I don't know. I think again, I think this distinction is a way of sort of masking the fact that you feel you have too many games. Because, oh no, I'm not just a player, I'm a collector. That's why I have 400 games.
No, but it's also, I enjoy having fuck tons of games. I enjoy collecting them for the pure pleasure of just owning them.
Oh yeah, fair enough. My point is basically what I was trying to get at was I'm not sure that I think it's a distinction that's common that people do make. That, as you said, they imagine a spectrum, but I think it's usually just the game provider and the player. I think collector sort of puts too much of a spin on it because I do know that the people in my regular gaming group have, for the most part, fewer games than I do. I feel that I'm the person that buys most of the games because we're gaming. We meet at my place and play the games there. I do remember some players just not having less than 10 games at home for whatever reason. None of them healthy, I'm sure. Just being happy to play with as part of other people's collection, so to speak. So I think this distinction does exist, but it's really just more of one person providing the games and the other one playing and enjoying the games. It was much more prevalent in during my role-playing days, where one person has all the stuff and the other one's just bringing a bag of chips.
I mean, that's it. Role-playing is incredible. I mean, that thing, if you're the DM, and I've been DM for D&D for a couple of years now, you do everything. You buy all the stuff, you do all the work, and then the rest of them just turn up.
Or cancel in the last minute, which I love about role-playing games.
And that's really, it seems really weighted to one side. Whereas I think, most of the people I know own board games and have quite a few. Mm-hmm. Most people aren't as rabid as I am, but some people certainly are and have to have all the new stuff.
Right.
But I would you say that the limit to people's collection, neurosis would be an apt word?
What do you mean by that?
People just get neurotic when they get too many things and they go, oh God, I can't buy anything. And that's just a natural limiter.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's definitely true for me in that at some point I feel of course I bought another game recently because I'm an idiot. I do think at some point you go, all right, I actually want to, I spend all this money. And for me, at least, I don't feel it's a sensible thing to do to buy something just to own it. In that sense, I don't fill the psychological profile of a collector. I don't want to just own something. It plays into it. I mean, of course, I want to own a game so I can have the option of playing it, but I'm not satisfied with just owning something. So when I pick up another game off my wish list, which is now slowly shrinking, I just picked up Witness. I'm really looking forward to playing that. I do feel like I want to actually get something out of it. I'm not content just having it in my shelf the way I might be content having the complete season, all 5 seasons of Quantum Leap in my shelf. I just finished my collection of Quantum Leap DVDs. Excellent. That's different. I think with board games, I do want to get something out of it. I do feel annoyed, frustrated when I buy them and they are not used. So I'm not sure what I'm trying to say other than it's you, not me.
That's true. So we'll go on to Paniotis.
Yes.
Because he has a story, Georgios.
He does have a story which you can read on the forums, which you can find on Board Game Geek.
2438.
No. Try again.
2348.
That's better.
Sorry, the problem is, because, now I'm quite sort of Tory.
Yeah.
I was imagining them as sort of budget surpluses there.
Oh, yeah.
Because you always over-egg the numbers, don't you?
Yes, you do. Unless it's a deficit.
That's right.
Unless it's your own deficit. If it's somebody else's deficit, it's obviously much, much worse.
Exactly. So what is Panagiotis? Give us a précis of his story.
The précis is basically God smited his gaming collection and he learned his lesson and now asks himself, would I replace this game if God were to smite my collection again? And if the answer is yes, he will buy it. And if the answer is no, he may not buy it.
I think it's interesting because I think most people, when they get into the hobby, now this might be, I may be way off the reserve here, but
never happened before, so I'm sure it won't happen now.
But I think you hit that initial complete enthusiasm and you just buy everything, right? And you try and focus all of your efforts into buying games, and then your buying slows down. I think mine has slowed down over the last 2 years quite a lot. I don't buy everything, and not all my thoughts are bent upon buying games now. So I think this might be that part of it, I think what he says is true in that he looks at his collection and say, okay, this was destroyed. Do I think it's worth getting again? Probably not. Did I play it very much? Probably not. But also I think if I were to have to sell all of my games, right, and then just start my collection from scratch, I think inevitably it would be smaller.
Right, yeah.
Just because I would buy less, because now I buy fewer games, right?
Yeah, probably. I think, I do wonder to what extent gamers just naturally arrive at this point where they find their own little rule by which they decide what game to buy or which games to keep. I don't think there's one rule for everyone. It's not like a ring. As we talked in last episode, I found myself going, how will this game get played? If it will get played, I will buy it. If it won't get played, I won't bother. Panagiotis obviously goes with, would I miss it if it were suddenly taken from me? And if the answer is yes, he'll buy it because obviously he's missing it already. And I think others go by other rules, by questions of, I don't know, resale value maybe. And I think it's true. I think when you start the hobby, you don't necessarily buy everything, but your enthusiasm leads you to, or your lack of experience means that you don't quite know which factors matter to you. What matters to your collection? What matters to your gaming situation? When you start the hobby, you're just excited about everything that's new. Ooh, what's a worker placement? Ooh, what's a deck builder? Ooh, what's a cooperative game? And once you like one of those three, you buy another one of those, right, or a few more because they're different. Because, ooh, it's like a cooperative game, but blah-de-blah. But here you're using dice, and then here you're cupping somebody's testicles. My favorite version of Catan, by the way.
But there's a real pressure. I think there's also a real pressure if you're in the hobby and you identify as being in the hobby.
Right.
There's a real pressure to have all the new shit, right?
Possibly, yeah.
I mean, I see the furore over Terraforming Mars at the moment.
Right.
It's just come out with a second printing, and a friend of mine who sells games has just sold all of his copies. Like that,
Right.
Because there's this feeling that I have to own it, because that's the having the copy of White Teeth on the bookshelf, right? This is the copy of 1984 I've got on the bookshelf. This is the copy of Ulysses. Whether I actually read it, whether
a great book,
whether I engage with it or whatever, I should own it because that marks me out as a sophisticated person. That's a reason to buy as much as anything, right? I think for people.
Possibly, yeah. I think I just realized with me, it has to do with the fact that sometimes I really, really want to play a game. I know none of the people in my gaming group are going to buy it on their own volition, and I have no idea who in my outer circle friends might have a copy, and I don't really want to wait for Meetup to throw up a game night where they want to play that one game. So I buy the game, play it, and then I go, all right, it's okay, it's fine or not. And then I might actually get rid of it, as is now currently the case with Adrenaline. I picked it up fairly cheaply, played it once, I thought it was okay, might play it again, but I'm very fine with just, trading it off for another game I want to play, or just selling it off right now, because it's okay.
So let's go on to Phil.
Phil, yes.
Young Phil. The Wall Street broker.
Okay.
What does he say? Because I think Phil seems to be a man unencumbered by size.
Yes, well done. He says size doesn't matter.
That's right.
Yes.
And whereas everyone else here on the has basically said, oh, God blimey, and oh, it's so stressful, and I have to decide what to keep and what to get rid of. Phil seems to just gorge without any restraint whatsoever, and he seems to enjoy that. And I think that's interesting. And why do you think that is with Phil? Is it because, being a hotshot Wall Street lawyer, that he just makes all the money and he's got massive mansions in the Hamptons that he's able to keep all his games in?
I don't know Phil well enough. I'm going to assume that his gaming budget is not in the single digits per month. So he can afford to buy
under $10, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So he can afford to buy a game a month or something. He's fine with having games on reserve, I guess, which, again, I personally I feel uncomfortable with, but if he doesn't, more power to him. And finally, maybe he is one of those collectors you mentioned. Maybe owning is its own reward, and maybe knowing that there's the potential of having fun with this shrink-wrapped game in the future at some point. Maybe that's enough to feel content, and if so, excellent. Good luck, Phil.
I wonder if there's a difference between European gamers and American gamers.
Oh no, you can tell by the games there's absolutely no difference.
But I mean in terms of collection sizes. In America, generally, the houses tend to be bigger, right?
Yes.
They tend to have more space to put shit in. Whereas in Europe, we tend to live in smaller, more confined spaces. And so you have to consider that, I think.
Yeah, probably. I'm right now I'm trying to imagine what gaming collections in Japan might look like. I mean, I love Oink games, these tiny little games, even though I find that they're tad expensive, but they're good. You could actually have an entire collection of Oink games fit into a shoebox.
Well, I'm sure that's part of the consideration. If you look at a lot of Japanese games, it's only recently, since they've started to become really successful and, after Love Letter and things, that they're starting to get more and more into big box games. Before, they were all tiny little card games.
Maybe I don't know enough about the Japanese gaming scene, but from what we find here in the faraway West, it seems to be that way. Yeah.
Especially when you have a place like Tokyo that's so densely populated, where flats are so small. Board gaming seems to be a decadence, right? When space is at such a premium.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But there's also the fact that and again, I'm fairly culturally ignorant, so please excuse any bad descriptions of Japanese culture. But from what I've picked up and from what I understand, there is an aesthetic quality, aesthetic value of minimizing and essentializing something you do. So
right.
Breaking it down to the smallest components, like the most essential bits that you need, and nothing extraneous. That anything that's extraneous to a game is a waste, is somehow, it cheapens whatever it is that you put out. So there's this culturally innate desire to only do what's absolutely necessary, only have the absolutely necessary space, the absolutely necessary components to do whatever it is you want to do, be it a game, be it apparently poetry, be it any small form of art. It should be as small, as self-contained, and as compact and dense as possible.
The quintessence of what it is, essentially.
Basically,
to be itself and nothing else.
Yeah. Which sounds very sophisticated. I like that.
So, finally, let's talk to Giulio. Go all the way from Japan, all the way down to the tropical climes and toucan-ridden forests of Costa Rica.
Is it Giulio or is it Julio?
I'm going to go with Giulio because I fear if I do the other pronunciation, I'm going to come across as a little bit racist. And,
I don't mind. I'm going to do my Costa Rican accent. Hola, my name is Julio.
It's very good.
It's great, isn't it? It's fantastic. It's absolutely not racist.
The doctor said to me I should, nil racism by mouth before my operation, you see, Georgios. So
nil racism by mouth.
Yeah, I shouldn't say racist shit.
All right.
Because it'll make the transition a lot harder when I come out.
Oh, wait. That's a new topic. We haven't talked about that.
No, I'm transitioning.
Oh, excellent.
Well, because
now you're telling me.
I transitioned from sort of lefty to Tory, and I've got to retransition again. And it's harder when you retransition, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I might have to talk to your doctor again. The conversation we had before you woke up, I think...
I haven't had the operation yet.
I know.
Right.
But they're setting up their operation. We might have to clear up some misunderstanding. But let's move on to...
He's not going to chop my testicles off, is he?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
I'm going to quote him, not an accent, because I honestly don't know how to do a Costa Rican accent, but it sounds like something that could be fun. Living in Costa Rica, where games are really expensive, and having the budget of a college student, the only real limiting factor for my collection so far is how many games can I really purchase. I have around 40 games in my collection so far, a lot of small and cheap games, so space isn't the problem yet.
And that's really interesting because we think about, when we talk about these things, we're very myopic in the sense of we think about Europe and America, essentially.
Right.
And...
well, not so much myopic as, these are the places we kind of know.
Well, that's it. But myopic in the sense is that we never really consider other factors. We don't consider places where, and it's not that the societies are inherently less civilized or people earn less. I mean, sometimes that's a factor, but it's just the hobby isn't as prevalent, so the distribution channels aren't as well trammeled.
Right.
So it's just harder to get stuff. And when it's harder to get stuff, it's more expensive, right?
Yeah.
It's like, when the first sushi restaurant opens in London in the 80s, of course, sushi's ludicrously expensive. Now it's completely ubiquitous, so it's a lot cheaper, and it's not necessarily a quality drop. It's just the distribution channels are more open, and so people are able to get it more. We never really think about the distribution channels limiting our ability to expand our collections because they're so well established here, right?
Well, kind of. I think it was last episode where we talked about Role Player, which is really difficult to get in Europe, but easy to get in, apparently fairly easy to get in the US. And again, a question of distribution channels.
Well, I think singular games for sure. You can always have examples, but in general, I would say here, getting hobby board games, and in America, the ease with which you can get hold of them is pretty comparable, right?
Yeah, probably. I think there's still, historically, there's still this difference between German board games that used to be very difficult to get in English-speaking countries. Both Britain and the US, for pretty much the reason you mentioned. Nobody bothered importing them because, who's going to buy them? And when that changed, all of a sudden, board gaming got bigger and bigger in the US. But for some reason, I'm reminded of a story I read somewhere. And again, I'm going to be culturally ignorant here and slightly racist. And interestingly enough, I remember a country, might have been Latin America, it might have been Asia, I'm not sure, where there was a strong presence of effectively copied games, where people would find big sellers in Europe or big games in Europe or the US and basically copy them, maybe change the artwork slightly, do a translation for the local market, and then sell them as their own games, which I thought was a very interesting way of sort of circumventing the entire distribution problem. But now that we have somebody like Asmodee buying up all the distribution channels, maybe that is, tying it back to our topic, maybe that is a way of expanding markets by establishing distribution channels even in Costa Rica, which it is an island, right? I'm not that ignorant.
I don't think it is. No, I think it's part of Central America.
Man, I'm so bad at everything. All right, so it is in the world. That's
it's
right.
In the world, yeah.
Excellent.
Definitely
it is in the world. It might have a coastline.
Probably.
All right, it has a coastline.
Right.
So ships can go there. So maybe now if Asmodee invests into more, freighters, Costa Rica will finally have the booming, thriving board game market it deserves. So even Julio or Julio can buy the games at a fair price and wonder about where to put them.
Well, sorry, Georges. I'm just they're calling me in.
Yes, they are.
I got my copy of Communist Manifesto with me.
Why?
Well, they told me that's I need it to help in the transition.
Oh man, that's like treating sniffles with antibiotics.
And then
idiots.
I mean, just wish me luck, Georgios, and then hopefully I'll come out the other side a more rounded, less selfish person.
You're going to need a lot of luck for that.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, as I said, I need to explain the transition thing to the doctor again.
I'm Nick Mariner, and this is the Board Game Professor. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's good to be back. Time Turns out we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so the bit that I had recorded for this week got lost, and I am, in order to get onto the show on time, I'm going to do a real quick, unscripted recap of my thoughts. Let's see how this goes. Should be pretty fun, but I didn't want to miss 2 episodes in a row, so I'm gonna get this going, and that way I can be on the show. I am going to warn you, however, the allergies in Dallas, Texas right now are completely out of control, so I probably sound like crap, and I apologize. Okay, the game I wanted to talk about this week, I've been thinking a lot about, and that is a game called Barcelona, the Rose of Fire, Bourgeoisie and Revolution, 1860 to 1930. One of the reasons I love this game is because that sounds like some pretentious twat's thesis title, and that makes me love it even more. It's the only board game I can think of that sounds like the title of a dissertation. Ben and Georgios reviewed this game a couple episodes back, if you'll recall, so I don't need to go into a great detail of what the game's about. I think if I'm remembering right, if you're remembering right, they sort of came down on thinking the game's pretty good. It's an interesting exercise in trying to simulate a historical moment in Spanish history, but perhaps an unpolished and unfinished game design. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I found the game, I've only gotten to play it once, and in that first play I found it just fucking frustrating, not being able to do some of the things I wanted to do. But there is a reason I want to talk about this game, and it's in keeping with this idea of tapping into games to think a little bit more deeply about social theory. Barcelona is a game in which you are essentially developing the buildings in the city of Barcelona as it sort of explodes economically right around the turn of the century. And a lot more people are coming in. And so you're having to balance satisfying the bourgeois, the upper class, with the proletariat, the immigrants, the working class coming in. You have to find room for everybody. And one of the interesting mechanics of this game, I think, is there's an immigration meter every round. There's going to be a certain number of immigrants coming in, and on your turn, you're going to play a card which constructs a building. Buildings have 4 different classes. The upper class building has a rank of 1. The like working class buildings have a rank of 4, and then everything else in between. What you're going to do every round when you put down a building is you're going to subtract the rating of your building from the current immigration rate, and whatever that leftover number is going to be how many workers you have to send into the Reval or perhaps the barricades. And if you have too many, you're eventually going to sustain a strike. So essentially, if you only build upper class buildings, which are going to give you a lot of points, you're going to have a lot of striking workers because you're not making room for the immigrants. So there's lots of other things going on in the game. Obviously, that's not the full recap, but that's one of the elements of this game I want to talk about because it's really gotten me thinking. Since I've played it, I've really been thinking a lot more about a few different concepts within the realm of social theory and cultural studies. The first is hegemony, Antonio Gramsci's theory, which I'm actually going to come back to completely on a different episode. But I do want to sort of point out now to get you thinking about this idea that hegemony or hegemonic control was a concept conceived to figure out like how can you sustain oppression and disfranchisement of a working class in an era in which we have a constitution and laws and you can't just force stun people with your rule. And hegemony as a concept is the idea that there are ways to do it that particularly require the disfranchised population to acquiesce, to sort of agree to have their disfranchisement happen. And one of the ways that can happen is housing, providing adequate space for people to live, so that they are, as long as they are, the bread and circuses idea, as long as they're well enough cared for and entertained, they'll be less likely to revolt. But there's a branch of social theory that I wanted to talk about in relation to this game, and it's called that field's called critical geography, and it comes from, it shouldn't be any surprise, the discipline of geography proper. And it's one of its most oft-cited advocates is a scholar named David Harvey, who is the most commonly cited human geographer in the field. By human geographer, I mean he studies geography in relation to human populations, not the fact that he is a geographer who's also human. everybody knows David Harvey is a hill troll from Ireland, so he's a human geographer by trade. Critical geography as a field was a turn in the discipline of geography proper, capital G geography, and trying to figure out why spaces look the way they do. Why do human populations arrange themselves in particular ways? And that is the job of any human geographer, really. Why do cities look the way they do? Why do people place themselves in space in a particular way? And that's been applied across all sorts of different analyses. But critical geography wasn't, sort of anything that's got the word critical in it draws its roots from Marxism. But it was an attempt to understand the way that capitalism and economic imperative were the driving factors in why people arrange themselves like they do. And what David Harvey and a lot of the people who came after him argued is that most of our cities and most of our spaces are arranged for the particular need of sustaining capitalist production. So you put the workers close to the factories, you separate the workers from the owners of production, you arrange your city specifically in ways that you will not disrupt or put any halt to production itself. And that is sort of the critique of human geography that comes from critical geography is, pointing out the ways in which people arrange their spaces specifically toward the oppression of the working class, to keep the working class no more than working class. It's not an accident that there's a Whole Foods and an Apple store in one mall. You cross the train tracks and go 3 blocks over, and you're sitting next to a liquor store and whatever else like that happens on purpose. It didn't happen by accident. So this is what I think about this a lot when when I was playing the game Barcelona, the Rose of Fire, because it's what the game is. Explicitly in the game, you are required to accommodate for immigration and workers, just enough to keep from having a revolt, a workers' strike. But ultimately, you're not going to win the game if you can't produce some upper class buildings as well. You're going to have to get and arrange a geography in which the bourgeois, the owners of everything, are satisfied. And you have to extend just enough coverage of the needs of the working class to keep them working rather than revolting. Because you'll find in the game that when you get that labor strike card in your hand, it's incredibly limiting to what you get to do on the next turn. So but you can't just oppress and hope to get anywhere in this game. But the other thing that I love about the game, and I would like to praise it for, because even though it is sort of a little wonky and convoluted, especially the first time you play it, getting through the rules, it's consideration of workers as people in the game I found utterly fascinating. And it is one of the only games I think I can think of off the top of my head in which workers' revolt is a potential outcome of the mistreatment of your workers. Most worker placement games treat the workers as commodity. It's just a resource for you to use and manage, and maybe you have to not starve them. Maybe you have to try to pay them at the end. But I can't immediately think of a lot of games in which if you don't consider the treatment of the working people in the game, you're going to be facing a reaction or a revolt. And I think that's fascinating because most of this sort of the cultural theory and critical theory of the last 40 years in particular has tried to get us to acknowledge that oppression isn't just done to people, but that these people are human actors capable of understanding their own oppression and occasionally capable of resisting, even if that resistance is something small like, breaking a tool at work and pretending like, oops, I guess I can't do this job or whatever. And this game acknowledges that. This game makes that part of the design, which I think it's fantastic. So it is not certainly not my favorite game I've played in the last 6 months, but as an attempt at engaging a social theory and a social practice and to sort of simulate the way people arrange themselves when they're all squished into a place together like they are in a city, I think the game is very praiseworthy and interesting and worth thinking about. And it's worth playing this game and thinking deeper about this idea. How do we arrange ourselves? Why, when you're driving down the street, does as soon as you hit a particular landmark, the landscape shifts immediately? Like, none of that happened accidentally. None of that happened by circumstance. Especially in the United States, that's dictated by race and immigration as well. And so I think that this game is worth your time if these are some questions you feel like considering a little bit more deeply. But that was very quick. I just tried to recap everything I could remember wanting to talk about in the last segment, and I hope this file will work and get on the show. And I'll see you all in a couple weeks. I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter @TheGoodMariner. Thanks for listening.
So I hauled Georgios out of the fumigation chamber.
Yes.
His throat has been sprayed with arsenic because that's the modern German cure for whatever you had.
Yes.
And but unfortunately, our time was abridged. And so what's going to happen, Georgie?
Well, now that we've established my alibi, and I was definitely nowhere near that bank because I was sick, obviously.
That's right.
That is true. You've confirmed that. And we also do not have a review due to scheduling conflicts. But we do have something else, which is?
We have an interview with Ignacy Trevicek of Portal Games. When we released a few weeks ago an interview with Marko Miladinovic about the closure of his game store, and I wanted to speak to people in the industry to ask them what they felt about the Asmodee policy, and also when it came out, what was their reaction to it. And I thought, there's no one sort of more central to the hobby game industry at the moment than Ignacy, and he was gracious to give his time, and I think what he says is interesting. And so please sit back, listen to the dulcet Polish tones of Ignacy from Portal Games. So we're talking about the Asmodee acquisition thing, and I guess the first time this really came to the forefront of the sort of board gaming world was when they bought Days of Wonder. And what were your initial thoughts when that happened? Did you see what was going to come, or did you just think, oh, that's interesting? What sort of ideas did you have?
I was surprised. I was intrigued. I was super happy. Then I started talking with some friends of mine from the industry and talking about this. And at the very beginning, our initial thoughts was that of course, Days of Wonder has Ticket to Ride. Of course, Days of Wonder has a great IP and great brand. But what's more, Days of Wonder was known in the industry for years for having a great digital division, I would say. They were the first app on iPad back then in 2010 was a Small World. Then Hiroshima Hex was the second app, by the way. Then there was a Ticket to Ride, a very popular application. And as I was talking with my friends, publisher friends, we were thinking that this is a very interesting move to start using Asmodee games for applications. Of course, then history showed that the app, of course, was important for Asmodee because now we have Asmodee Digital, but basically it was the very first step of many other acquisitions as well.
So you said you were happy. Why happy?
I thought that Days of Wonder has a great brand, and with Asmodee they will be able to have a better distribution and more better games. So I was quite intrigued, and I was looking forward what will happen next.
And so, I mean, obviously since then they've gone on to acquire almost everybody.
Yeah.
Was that something that you saw coming even after Days of Wonder, or was that a big surprise to you? I mean, FFG seemed to come almost out of the blue, it seems.
Yes, I was totally not seeing that. As far as I was talking with my friends, some people knew it's coming, so there was some information in the industry that it may happen. But for me, it was a super big surprise. As I mentioned, when they bought the Days of Wonder, I said, wow, it is interesting, that's cool. But then there was FFG, then there was the Z-Man Games, then there was many small French companies. And from my perspective, it was like things getting out of the control in terms of buying everybody. And so at the beginning, this few years ago, I didn't saw it coming that they will buy so many companies, and basically now they own most of the industry.
And what's the feeling within the non-Asmodee industry about this? Do you see this as a good thing? Do you see this as a bad thing? Are you worried? Are you excited?
I see this as a very interesting situation. On one hand, it is perfectly clear for me right now that the companies like Portal Games have absolutely no chance to compete with the big fishes. They are too big to compete with them. So on one hand, I see that there's no way and there's no actual sense to compete for them for the market. But on the other hand, it's super challenging to try to be as good as possible and to match the level of quality and distribution they present. And in the other hand, it is also quite interesting for us to be put in the views of the gamers as this independent publisher. So now Portal Games is one of the, I would say, medium-sized companies who are not bought by Asmodee. We are now independent. We show that we are independent, that we can do great games like Asmodee, but we are not bought by them. So for us, it's a very great chance to show that, hey, we are not bought by Asmodee, support us, we are independent company, and please be with us. So it's on one hand, of course, it's difficult to compete with such a big company. On the other hand, it is a quite cool way to present our company as a contradiction to this big gorilla.
So, I mean, Asmodee have not just been buying games companies, they've been buying a lot of distribution companies too.
Yes.
Do you see this as dangerous? Do you see this as a conflict of interest on their part? Are they seeking some sort of monopoly, or are people overreacting?
This part of their purchases is worrying me. Of course, in theory, nothing bad would happen to Portal Games. But on the other hand, if one publisher owns all of the distribution in Europe, because they at this very moment they basically have all distributors in Europe, because they have HDVium for UK, they have Edge for Spain, they have Heidelberger from Germany, they have Infravin for Nordic countries, and they have Millennium for France. So basically they have all the distribution in Europe. And in this very, very, very dark scenario that hopefully will not happen, but in theory it is possible that they will say, okay, we are Asmodee and you distributors, because we own you, you will now distribute only our games. In theory this is possible, right? And of course that would mean that I'm closing my company because I have no distribution in Europe that way at this very moment. So of course I don't believe it will happen, but of course I have it in my mind, I have it at the back of my head at every single day that of course one day I can read press release, Asmodee will be distributed exclusively by these distributors and no other company will be. So yes, I am a little bit worried, but of course in terms of being serious, nothing should happen bad for me.
Do you have to go through, you obviously have to go through these distribution companies yourself. Have you noticed a change since they were acquired by Asmodee, or is it just the same process as normal?
At this moment we see no change. Last year there was a super small signal that looked like there's a problem, because we wanted to go to one of the trade shows organized by one of the distributors, and we got this feedback that there is no space for us at the exhibitor space, and I was worried, and I thought, whoa, it's happening, they are not letting us be presented, but it turned out that it is only miscommunication, and it was solved very quickly, and there was a space for Portal Games. So either though the distributor was owned by Asmodee, other publishers, other vendors were allowed to be at this trade show, and we presented our games to the retailers. So at this very moment I saw no single problems at all. As I said, I believe that this is only super dark scenario, and it will never happen that something bad will happen with distribution for other independent companies. I hope this is only theoretical problem.
I want to talk now about the way games are sold. So what do you see the advantages of the friendly local game store for just normal people buying games over internet sellers?
This is a super, super tough topic, and this is for the super long discussion, probably some tea or beer. Because on one hand we see most of the publishers and especially in States, trying to support local game stores. This is this huge trend started by Asmodee, by the way, with early launch kits, with some promo items only for brick and mortar retailers. There's a lot of work done to support brick and mortar stores, and we at Portal Games do the same. We also support brick and mortar stores. I personally was owner of 2 brick and mortar stores in my life past years, so I totally understand how difficult it is. But I am afraid that the future is online. Like, we all have iPhone or Samsung, and we buy on Amazon because we are lazy and we prefer to just click and have it next day at home. And Amazon is now doing a drone delivery and all this kind of stuff, and it's happening. Like, I'm afraid that at some point we all will be online, and of course we can now struggle and we can support, and we do, and we want to support brick and mortar stores to give them our help. But in 5 years, or maybe in 10 years, or maybe in 20 years, there will be only online stores. That's my vision of the future. If we compare how our life, I'm speaking about the general our life, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, we didn't have iPhone. Now we have an iPhone, and we have apps, and we have Amazon, and we have drone delivery, and the technology is moving so fast. And everybody tells now that Facebook will open a Facebook store. There's quite big news in the social. The moment Facebook opens the Facebook store, it will be so easy to just click in Facebook and have the game next day at home. You will not go in the rain, in the London rainy day, to visit your local game store and have a problem finding parking, etc. Like, I totally support brick and mortar stores. As I mentioned, I owned 2 of them, so I know how hard it is. But I'm afraid we will not stop the technology revolution that is happening in our lives.
So you said you want to support brick and mortar stores, but why? What do they offer us as gamers?
They have this amazing way, if they work hard and if they work well, to promote our hobby in the local city, in the local village, in the local place, the way the online cannot. Of course, online has their very own ways to promote board games. They can run Facebook ads, they can run Google ads, they can do all the things on YouTube shows like we all do in online life. But if you are talking about the brick and mortar store, and this is what I was doing in my city back then, I was running small conventions in the city. And such a small convention brings so much new people to the hobby, because you just put a poster in the schools, on the walls in the city, on different places in the city. Please come, this open day, we play board games, visit us, and let's have a fun. And there's so many random people who will just, okay, I will go, I have a free Sunday, I will come, and they will learn about the board games. And if the management of the game store knows how to do this, they will put a ticket to ride, they will put it spotted, they will put times up, make amazing weekend for the local community, and promote the games so much better than even the best Facebook ads. Yes, because the people will play these games this particular weekend, have a great time, and they will stay with our hobby. So I believe that the brick and mortar stores have a huge tool to promote the hobby locally that is so much stronger than even the best online advertisement.
So let's go back to just before Asmodee released their announcement that they were going to limit internet sales and who can and what can be done. How did you feel friendly local game stores before this announcement were faring? How were they doing? Do you think they were declining, or do you think they were, with the new influx of people into the hobby, were they faring better?
I believe there is if there is a good game store, it will survive. If there's a bad store, it will die. And Asmodee policy on anything else has nothing to do. In Poland, we see the constant change in the market. I mean, there is some stores are dying, new stores are open, some stores stay for a couple of years, some stores became classics and well known in the area. This is like in any other regular business. If you are good, you stay in the business. If you're not good, you're out of the business. And the case of Asmodee or online, not online, it has nothing to do. My game store, my brick and mortar store, was done. It is over, because apparently I was not a super good game store owner. I was focused on publishing games and didn't have enough time. So I was not putting enough hard work to make this game store alive, and it was closed. And I deserved that, yes, because I was not doing my best, because I was distracted by having a publishing house. While the other game stores in my area, in the cities around my city, survived, because the owner was fighting very hard for the customers, doing events, doing some tournament kits and such stuff. So it all stays in hard work. And I don't see any influence of Asmodee on that.
So, what was your feeling when they first announced their internet selling policy? Because I guess, I mean, you said it earlier, they were the ones who sort of started this, and I guess this was the first thing that happened, the first game company that came out and said, we're going to use our financial muscle, I guess, to do this. What do you think was the industry's opinion? What was your own opinion on when they did this? Do you think it was good? Did you question their motives?
My opinion was very bad. I don't want to criticize too much, especially such a big company like Asmodee. But my opinion was bad. But I believe this is because of I'm from Poland. We had a thing like a communism when I was a child. So all the things that are connected with some trying to control things from above, I don't like them. My childhood was all being controlled by Russia. So if I see in any aspect of my life situation that somebody is trying to control me and tell me that I can sell online or I cannot, I don't get it. I don't like it. My parents and their friends were fighting for free Poland back then. And so I took it very personally, but I believe more on my personal, I would say, experience than on a business experience. When I heard that Asmodee is telling that either you are a brick and mortar store and you cannot sell online, either you are an online store but you will not get a discount, I said, okay, this is like Russia telling us that either we have this or this. So in this particular situation, I believe that my approach is a little bit, tweaked by history of my childhood, basically. Basically, I don't get it. In a free world, here in Europe, it is impossible actually to dictate the prices. Yes, the European law doesn't allow any company to dictate the prices. If you can sell the stuff for the price you want, my perspective is it was very strange that some company says to other partners, you can sell for this price, but not for this price, and because we said that. It was strange, but as I said, this is because of all the things that are in my life.
And how do you feel that their approach compares to other companies? Because I think now WizKids have come out and they've taken a slightly different approach where they say sort of you can get the game 2 weeks early in game stores and then it goes to online retailers, that sort of thing. How do you think the Asmodee model compares to other companies, and have you tried to do similar sort of things within Portal?
Yeah, so we see right now for the past year, because the Gamma trade show was almost exactly 1 year ago, so we are now 11 months after this announcement from Asmodee, and we see so many different companies trying their own approach how to help brick and mortar stores, because in theory, at least as a press release from Asmodee, in theory, the reason for their new policy was to help brick and mortar stores. What is the real reason? We can, of course, debate and have a super interesting podcast, but officially it was to strengthen the brick and mortar stores. As you can see in the interviews, there was a very, very famous interview from the buyer from the Seattle store called Card Kingdom. And these buyers said very clear in the interview that this policy is actually making much more difficult for brick and mortar stores to survive. Because if there was a let's assume small brick and mortar store from Richmond, and he was selling a couple of games in real life, but he had this very small online site and he was selling their stuff as well, yes? And now he cannot. So actually, he lost some money. But going back to the different companies, there is so many different approaches. So I saw lately, for example, Renegade Games created the whole package. There's a whole box with the promos for their games, and the retailer can buy this box and then award customers with these super cool promos that are available only in brick-and-mortar stores. A famous example from last year was Terraforming Mars from Stronghold Games, released 2 weeks before Street Date. It was a huge success for Terraforming Mars and for Stronghold Games because the game had a huge hype beforehand, and then it was available for 2 weeks only in a brick-and-mortar store. So everybody who was pumped about the game and wanted to buy the game, he went to the brick-and-mortar stores. There is thing like early launch kit done by a couple of companies that is not only selling the game earlier, but adding some additional value to the game. If you are entering the game stores in brick-and-mortar stores, for example, Portal Games last year we did something like that with Robinson Crusoe, that actually there was a special unique scenario to be played at the brick-and-mortar stores during the weekend of a premiere of the game. So we tried to help the owner of brick-and-mortar store to organize the event around the Robinson Crusoe because we gave him a tools special scenario to be played at the game store.
Yeah.
I saw news exactly today in the internet that the company, it was Upper Deck, offered the special promo that has a unique artwork for the first print run on the game. So once again, they try to give some additional promo for the customer. So we see all the different approaches to help brick-and-mortar stores. And if it works, I don't know. I believe it is super, super difficult for brick-and-mortar stores to compete with the online stores that discount the games so hard. And for the customer, it is a matter of calculation. Either you wait a couple of days, you ignore some cool promos, but you have the game 40% off, or you are loyal to your local game store and you go to your local game store and you buy the game from the local game store. We have now pre-ordered for First Martians, as we talked before recording, and this is exactly the case when we have on a Board Game Geek website, there is a thread, some of the fans complaining that the price from the Portal Games website is so high, and then of course there is a debate, hey guys, this is not a high price, this is a suggested retail price, and you are guys comparing it with some discounted websites who sell it with the huge discount, and this is your choice. You go to the online game store and you buy it very, very cheaply, or you go to the local game store, or you go to the publisher directly because you want to be loyal, because you want to have some additional value in terms of the First Martian, there is some promo stuff. It is your choice. It is always your choice. So if there is a local game store who does a good business, who has a loyal customers, who has these promos given by the publishers, he will have some customers. But he has to understand that some of his customers will go for the cheaper price because for many people, the price is the key argument, right?
So you said that, there are other theories as to why Asmodee are doing this. What would they be?
For me, it was a super cool way to actually get a huge list of retail, because last year at Gamma they said you have to log in to our system, give us your details about your game store. So they basically in 24 hours get data for every single game store in States, right? And now they can, of course, if we talk about some super crazy theories, they can literally say it now to all the distributors in States, guys, we have all the contact information to every single game store in States, so basically we don't need you. Yes. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that they have now the data, they have now the full contact with the retailers, they have a direct contact with them, they have the tools to send them tournament kits, they have tools to make the events, like they literally own the distribution. It's super interesting. This is a big business. We all know that Asmodee actually is a very big company, is owned by a very big company, so this is big business meeting our small cool social hobby.
And so do you think that other companies will implement policies like this going on into the future, or do you think Asmodee are the only ones that are big enough to be able to do so? I
believe there is no other company strong enough at this very moment who can be as a gorilla styled as Asmodee and inform other retailers, either you buy on our terms, either you don't buy, because Of course, there's a Cool Me or Not. Of course, there's a lot of medium-sized companies like Portal, like Stronghold, like Tasty Mistral Games. But basically, we will never risk dictating our terms to the retailers. We stay as the industry works and as the regular terms of cooperation are.
And finally, just to finish, you've touched on it a bit previously, but what do you see the future of the local game store to be? Are they doomed? Do you think there'll be no more in 10 years? Or will this sort of expansion into game cafes and diversification into other areas, will that continue apace?
My guess would be that they will change it to cafes or gaming clubs or such thing. Like, they have to be as social as possible, and they have to keep their customers, because it will be so hard for them to keep the customers if the customers can buy games cheaper. Here in Europe, we don't have, I don't know how it's in UK, but in general, we don't have such a huge discounts online like in States. Like in States, it's really ridiculous. Like, you have a Cool Stuff INC or Miniature Market, they go 40% off. And if the game costs $100, this is Star Wars Rebellion, and you can buy Star Wars Rebellion for $100 at your local game store, or for the $60 online, it's really hard to keep this customer and make this customer pay almost twice as much just because he's loyal. So I would say that they will change into the cafes, they will change into some social places. I was visiting an amazing game store in UK last year in Birmingham. Not in Birmingham, it was Reading. And in Reading, and this game store is owned by a super wise and nice and smart people. And this is on one hand a game store, but the whole upper part of the game store, the whole second level of the game store, is a huge gaming area with then gaming nights, with the small conventions, etc. So they are building the community very strongly, and this is the only way. But basically, it's hard to predict what will happen, but if we recall this interview 10 years ago, there was no iPhone in our hands, right?
Right.
And now it is an iPhone. And it changed the whole life of the whole generation. Everybody's changed, yes? So my guess is we are getting online more and more and more.
Brilliant. Well, that's everything I've got to ask you. Thank you so much for your time, Ignacy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're only shackled if we choose to wear shackles, Georgios.
Tutti frutti on Rudy. Tutti frutti on Rudy. Tutti frutti on Rudy.
A what babaluba, a what bamboo. How do people contact us?
They can use our website, infoperfected.com. They can use our email, which is infoperfected@gmail.com. They can use Twitter, which is @infoperfected or @perfectedinfo. They can use our Board Game Geek group, which is number 2348, the Guild of Perfect Information. They can use Facebook, which is Perfect Information Podcast, I believe. They can use Instagram. Well, not much for contacting, but for looking at pictures of games, which is Perfect Information. And I think that's more or less it.
Yeah, so, and also, we're going to start a Patreon. It's probably going to be delayed due to Georgios's illness, but we're going to start a Patreon in the next 2 weeks. We're going to let you know. Maybe we'll launch it at the next episode. Who knows? And so if you think what we do is worthwhile and you want to give us some money, that would be great. If you want to tell people you know about the show, that would be amazing. If you want to go on Reddit, you want to go on BGG, you want to speak to people, you want to tell them about it, that would be fantastic. If you want us on the show, that would be great. And if you want us to review your games, just drop us an email at infoperfected@gmail.com and we'll do our best to do the best by you.
More or less. Also, because I like pimping my own stuff, I said some things about a game that everybody loves. People are going crazy over it.
Check out the Gloomhaven review on infoperfected.com.
I wouldn't call it review. Let's call it an article.
He wrote an article on Gloomhaven. It's very good. So get on there, learn some stuff, you people.
And then tell me how I'm wrong.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm going to have a drink.